These are the people who are pushing ESG and failing energy policies down our throats. And maybe, just maybe, this Italian election is the first step in a European pushback. We thought our next guest was the perfect person to cover this with. Please welcome Rebecca Walser, president of Walser Wealth Management, to the show. Thanks for being on, Rebecca. It was an interesting election, and it was good to see, I suppose. And now maybe we can get a little bit of pushback from those folks at the European Union in Brussels who, look, I lived over there. I had actually a European passport for some time. And they're unelected leaders that really have the power to shape your lives, mostly for the worse.
That's exactly right, Scott. You know, what they're trying to do with the EU is always they were trying to emulate the United States. And the problem is that the United States was formed, obviously 13 colonies, grew into 50 states, but we didn't have a national identity and a national culture separate and apart. The members of the EU have very strong cultural national identities, and yet they're trying to treat them as a bloc. So when you get these EU people making these edicts, this is frankly why the UK exited with Brexit. They said, no, we're not going to have immigration policy dictated to us from Brussels, and we're done and we're leaving. And that's exactly what happened with the UK. And it's also now what's happening with Italy. They're not suggesting they're leaving the EU, but they're moving away from these EU policies that really just, a lot of people just don't agree with them. You know, I think a lot of media propaganda, Scott, has pushed that this is how the masses feel. And yet somehow that's not how the masses are voting. So we need to dissect that.
You're right. I mean, I've been doing this TV gig for a long time, and I lived over there for 16 years. And while I had the chance to be on, you know, the Sky Newses or the BBCs of the world out there, I would often say something that I thought was very commonsensical, which is how I try to live my life. But I said, you know, I don't see the European Union lasting that long. Now, I've been wrong for 30 years now, but I just said, look, you've got, say, 28 countries with no same start date, no same culture, right?
Right.
And you think, and no same language. You think you're going to get all. We run the risk of, say, Texas and California leaving our union every year, right? And we have the same start date, the same culture, and the like. So Here we go. And so I think maybe I'll be right, but it's just been taking a longer term to have that come to fruition, because slowly but surely, and it led with Britain. This might not be the greatest idea. It's a great idea to have it as a trading partner, but that they had that beforehand though. They didn't have to go codify it into this big United States of Europe idea,
Well, and the interesting thing is that they do this a lot for economic reasons, Scott. We all know they wanted a uniform currency. They wanted a trading bloc. And you know what? This is actually impacting people, because as the EU not only loses parity from the dollar, but actually dips below the US dollar, this is causing them a lot more problems, because a lot of the debt of these nations is still denominated in dollars. And so as the dollar becomes stronger, this is putting more pressure on this EU bloc economically. And they did it for this reason, to have an economic block of power. So I think that a lot of countries are realizing, wow, we're really tied to the US. We really are beholden to the US dollar. As the dollar becomes stronger, the EU becomes weaker. And this is making more problem. The energy crisis so much worse. And so, Scott, it's just a problem all around. And I think that EU people and people globally are waking up to the fact that central bureaucracies do not represent what they want in their local communities. I mean, I feel like people are moving back away from corporate GMO foods and genetic modified everything, and moving back to local source, local beef, local veggies. This is what we all need to have, a healthy, sustainable life. And this is where we're headed. And people are going to vote according to their pocketbooks and how they're feeling. And this is another example of that. And I think we'll see a lot more of it, Scott.
I agree with you. And I think the pandemic, when it comes to the food, really taught a lot of us. We want to know where this is coming from, right? Because when folks moved out to the country became cool again. Heck, that's why I'm on this show right now, because country's cool again. I'm making it cool again. But I do think you're exactly right. And I lived over there long enough to see what those bureaucrats, and you know what, a lot of them are unelected. And then all of a sudden they got to come into the little street vendor and say, this all has to be metric system. You can't do pounds and ounces anymore.
Exactly.
And these little old ladies and guys that have been doing it in their families for 60 years have got to now move. It was insane. And then they did the same thing in France with their cheeses. They had to, all of a sudden they had to regulate all these are and that's why I think that these ideas, especially when it comes to the World Economic Forums of the world, these things ultimately will fail. You just need a crack in the wall to have some pushback. And maybe Meloni's it in Italy. I don't know. What do you think?
I think she's a great crack to start. And I just expect so many big things, even, Scott, before the end of this year. There's going to be so many whistleblowers and revelations coming forward. Everyone will be shocked. We'll be talking about it from now until the end of the year. This is going to be a 3-month period here, October, November, and December, of great change, globally. And everyone should really be prepared and expect unusual things to start happening, because that's the season that we are in. Crazy things beginning to happen.
Well, I want everybody to do well out of it, and I want everybody to make a lot of money. But boy, oh boy, I can't say I'm not unhappy to see that type of news happen when I just start my own show, right? I get all the stories I want. So I got to be thankful. Anyway, thanks for coming on.
Yes.
Rebecca Walser from Tampa, Florida. Stay safe, by the way. I know you got a storm coming your way. All right.